and share my screen. And here we are in the usual format of things. We're going to do our question answers of regulations, a variety of in-class searching for regulations to get ourselves familiar with some of the steps and the things we need to think about perhaps when we tackle regs. I'll follow up with some of the pro tips, some of the things I think you need to keep in mind when you're doing this. And then a chance for any follow-up questions of things you're confused of or you didn't understand. So obviously the first question is who makes regulations? Do we have any thoughts about that? Yeah, Kayla.
Agencies.
Agencies make regulations. That's correct. Trevor, you had your hand up. Did you have something else to say?
I was just going to say regulatory bodies such as like agencies and administrations. So
right. Okay. So regulatory bodies. That's pretty much it. So federal and state governments, they both have agencies, right? Legislatures. The legislatures, the federal legislature, and then your state legislatures, they give the agencies powers to uphold and enforce the law through regulations. So the regulations, they are the creation of rules that implement broad codes and statutes. So if you think about the laws that are passed by Congress, the laws are like is a broad overview. It's a broad scheme work. The legislature is going to give some basic guidance to the environmental protection agencies and some theories and concepts of what needs to be regulated for clean air and clean waters and the like. But the legislatures aren't going to speak to all of the specificity and the narrowness required to make what the legislature wants done happen. So that's where the agencies come in. The agencies take the broad statutes and then create the regulations that the legislature wants them to enact. So the Environmental Protection Agency, the legislature wants them to regulate for clean air, and then the agency is going to implement narrow and specific rules which do that. So the next obvious question is, do these regulations have the force of law? Let's do a number 1 for yes or number 2 for no. In 3, 2, 1, and go. What do we think? All right, well done. So everybody, I think pretty much everybody says 1, they do have the force of law. Right, okay. So yes, we all got that answer correct. So we're batting 100% this morning. That's fantastic. Regulations govern exactly how a law is to be enforced. So by that virtue, they do have the effect of law unless the legislature changes the enabling legislation or overrules a regulation. Somehow they think that an agency has stepped too far, but until the legislature has spoken, a regulation does have the rule of law. Then of course the regulating agencies, they can change the rules, they can rescind a rule and things like that. But yeah, when the regs are in effect, they do have the power and force of law. All right, this might be a little more in the weeds, but where does the framework for rulemaking derive from? Any thoughts on that? All agencies at the federal level and in all agencies at your state level, they have to follow a certain set of rules and procedures when they enact law. Any thoughts of where this framework comes from? I'm not sure if that was in our reading or not. It's at the federal level, it's called the Administrative Procedures Act, so Title V of the United States Code. And then your state legislatures would likely enact some form or some version of their own Administrative Procedures Act to tell the agencies the practice and procedures and the do's and don'ts about how to go about creating regulations for things that they are empowered to do so. So the APA. So right there on this screen is sort of a flow chart of the rulemaking process. You can see at the beginning, the Congress passes a statute. So Congress says, hey, we want to do something. We want to preserve air. We want to keep the lakes and rivers clean. So there's a statute. So the empowered agencies that are under this statute, they will draft a proposed rule. This proposed rule will go through some agency process to get to the final version of the rule that they think they want. And then at some point, they're going to open up this rule for public comment. So people that might be affected by the rule would have the ability to write in or email in or voice their complaints or their concerns or their 2 thumbs up on this regulation. So a notice and comment period, at least 30 days for the notice and comment. The agency then goes in and reviews these notice and comment. They might, if there's enough comment that's very similar, and they might see some virtue to some of these comments and incorporate it into their final draft of their rule. And then after they incorporate these comments or changes into the rule becomes final. And then the final rule, the final rule will be published in initially the Federal Register. And then after it's published in the Final Register, the rule will be implemented. And at some point here in the notice and comment period in the Federal Register, they will also publish the comment notice so that people are aware that the agency is looking for comment on proposed rules. So the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, they're charged with these initial steps of drafting the initial rules, getting it on the agenda, and getting it out to people to consume for the notice and comment period. For regulations under review, you can go to reginfo.gov is a handy website to be aware of. The Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs. So you can click on here, you can see which regulations are under a review. You can click and see the unified agenda for the various agencies. And then you can go through all of these bar charts and see which rules are in notice and comment and period. You can click on and you can view the comments and things like that. So that's reginfo.gov. Twice a year, the agencies are supposed to post online their unified agenda and regulatory plan so that the legislatures and us as a public can see the broad scheme of what's going on. So the fall 2020 is the most current unified agenda. You can get that at reginfo.gov. I guess the agencies would all be now working busily on the spring 21 unified agenda. So you can get an idea of the overarching view of what needs to be done or what the agencies are working on. Question, what's the difference between the CFR and the FR, the Code of Federal Regulations and the federal regulations? So does anybody know what the difference between those two animals are? Rachel?
I think the first one is like the official one when they're all like totally becoming like law and they're passed. And then the federal register, I think, is just the newspaper that they post if they're like coming out with new ideas.
Okay, that's pretty much correct. The Code of Federal Regulations is the annual permanent copy of all of the final rules that are approved. So they go into the Code of Federal Regulations. The federal regulations, yeah, back in the day, it was a newspaper. It's a daily, well, Monday through Friday publication of all of the agency actions, of all of the proposed rules, the notice of comment being open, executive orders are thrown in the Federal Register. So anything that's not of a permanent nature would initially go into the federal the federal registrar, so that people can have access to that. So they would have access to the process and see the notes, see the comments, see what's going on. So the CFR is for the final rules. Now, some rules are exempt from the normal rulemaking process. So under the Administrative Procedures Act, theoretically, everything is supposed to flow through proposed rule by the agency, notice and comment 30 to 60 days, and then the final rule. But sometimes under the Administrative Procedures Act, some rules are exempt from the notice and comment period. Usually if it's, they deem it a national security matter, or it needs to be in slightly more secrecy, or it needs to be addressed quickly, the APA can exempt some rules from the formal rulemaking process, and some rules can go right to the final rule form. So publication in the Federal Register, as we said, published daily except Saturday, Sunday. The content's required to be judicially noticed. So, I mean, it's required under the APA that proposed rules and notice time periods are published so that the public is allowed to know about this. All issues, and then in a given year, constitute a volume in the Federal Register. So we're on whatever 1,000 volume of Federal Register now. So every year, it's one issue of the Federal Register. I mean, back in the day, it would be bound in a book and shoved in the shelf somewhere. Now it's just a volume. It's a number volume that you electronically access on federalregister.gov. I didn't update this slide since the fall, but as of 2020 September, 85 volumes of the Federal Register consist of 59,000 pages. So you can see the depth of Federal Register. So for one year of the Federal Register, almost 60,000 pages of stuff. So your Federal Register is going to contain parts of the CFR that have been impacted and updated. There's going to be a proposed rule section. There'll be notices giving the public notice of changes, and then finding aids to find what you want. So that's the Federal Register. It's huge. Searching the Federal Register, in reality, you're not going to use the print volume because I don't think anybody gets it anymore. So searching the Federal Register, here are some links that you're going to use. Federalregister.gov, maintained by the Office of Federal Register. The regulations.gov. This is a newer beta site that incorporates the incorporates the comments to proposed rules. So it incorporates the public action right into the Federal Register. So you don't have to go multiple places. Regulations.gov. Archives.gov. This includes links to the CFR White House document, and then also a link to the eCFR. The electronic CFR is a unofficial version of the Code of Federal Regulations, which has the proposed and new rules already included into it. So it's sort of like a Westlaw and Lexis version of the Federal Register and CFR combined. And if you have a citation to a Federal Register site or a CFR site, or even a case statute or a law legislative site, go to govinfo.gov. That's sort of like the overarching index of all of that's federal government related. So govinfo.gov. If you search on that site, you can find pretty much anything. So make sure you're aware of that, govinfo.gov. And then of course, Westlaw, Lexis, if your law firm has Bloomberg Law, and the historical versions of the CFR are available on the database Hein Online that you have access to through the law library as well. So a variety of resources to get at the Federal Register and the CFR, but your official version is the federalregister.gov. Your updated one is the regulations.gov. So these are the two main ones that I use. Arrangement of the CFR, as I'm starting to lose my voice here, sorry. Divided into 50 broad titles. Basically, the titles are, in a way, named by the name of an agency. Title 3 of the CFR is for the presidential documents. The executive orders and other presidential documents are in Title 3 of the CFR. And then each title is divided into chapters, usually bearing an agency name. To find something by CFR site, you need to know the title and the part. So down below here is an example of a Code of Federal Regulations site. Title 8 of the CFR, part 274.12A6. So that's a very specific, narrow regulation dealing with something. I think it's dealing with immigration, because usually my fact patterns somehow seem to always have immigration in it. So question, how and where do you find federal regulations? I've already given you the answer to a lot of these, federalregister.gov and regulations.gov, but are there any other places you can look? Government websites, secondary sources, agency websites, other places. What do we think? What would I think would be an easy way to find a regulation on point? I'm thinking like a librarian. What would I say? Barnett. Abigail.
I mean, it says you can just call agencies and ask them for their codes and they can just send them to you.
Yeah, you could. I'm not sure how quick that would be, but I mean, it is worth a shot. I would say go to their website rather than calling them maybe, but yeah. Any other answers or suggestions? Alexis.
In the library?
The library. Yeah, well, yeah, you can ask me. Perfect answer. Give me job security. So yeah, ask a librarian. Michael. Yes, sir.
Would that be the govinfo.gov website you mentioned before?
Yeah. Govinfo.gov, absolutely.
And regulations.gov?
Regulations.gov. Right to the agency website as well, if you're dealing with the Environmental Protection Agency on their website as well. So basically all of the above. Secondary sources. I'm a librarian. I love secondary sources. For example, this is the Pennsylvania Environmental Law Forum 2019. So within this Environmental Law Forum publication, they've republished the National Environmental Policy Act, 40 CFR. So you can get at a lot of the regulations right within a secondary source that touches upon your area of practice. That is sometimes the fastest way to go. The government website, so reg.gov, the eCFR. eCFR, that incorporates the proposed rules and the CFR, and then the GovInfo and Federal Reg, federalregister.gov, perfect places. I probably like GovInfo the best because it searches, or I like regulations.gov the best because it searches both the proposed rules and the CFR all in one place. It's a one-stop shopping center. The EPA, so an agency website. So laws and regulations. So regulations dealing with drinking water all on one page. You can click through, find the citations. And then with the citations, you could go to regulations.gov and pull it up quicker. I'm talking primarily federal and state resources, free resources. This is all available on Lexis and Westlaw too, but I find that the federal government and the state government, they make all of the regulatory stuff available for free and relatively searchable. So I like to keep people familiar with using non-Lexis and Westlaw materials if it's just as easy to use as Lexis and Westlaw, which in this case it is. Embassy websites, even so, especially for immigration, go to an embassy of the country you're in question with, and you can find information. So if you're looking for fiance visa information on the U.S. Embassy website in the Philippines, you can find all of the information you need, citations, people you need to call, talk to, etc. So an embassy website might be an interesting place to find your information. So let's see if we can find the answer to this. Our client recently met a Russian woman on the internet who is now his fiancée. She has received a K-1 fiancé visa. She'd like to know if she can still continue her job as editor and reporter for the Russian edition of Cosmopolitan magazine when she immigrates to America in a couple of months here to marry. Oh, she's going to marry him next month in America, so she's traveling within the next 2 or 3 weeks. Will she be able to work in America under a K-1 visa when she comes? Let's see if we can find an answer to that. And you can use whatever website you want, Lexis, Westlaw, regulations.gov, whatever you think might be handy. Generic Google search probably gives you the answer. Put the librarian out of business, but so be it. So any takers, what do we think? Will she be able to work immediately when she hits America? I don't need a specific citation or anything, just a yes or a no. What do we think? Somebody. From Michael, yes, does require a certain work permit. There you go. So the answer is yes, and it does require a certain work permit. Now this secondary source here, Kurzban's Immigration Law Sourcebook. This is a perfect example of a book that's not available online, but if you were practicing in immigration, you'd probably fork over the $400 to buy it. Unfortunately, it's not on Lexis, Westlaw, Bloomberg, or any other place that I'm aware of, so I have to buy it in print for the library. I go to the index entry for K1, and I see that a K1 is authorized under, and then here's my specific CFR site, the 274A12. I don't know why. So K1 employment index, page 582. K1 and K2 visas are authorized under the citation. In the old days, I might go to the print version of the CFR. We would have them in the ready reference section of the library. And I can see here under 274A12 employment authorization, if you file a certain form for a certain work permit, a K1 visa owner is allowed to work as soon as she hits America. On govinfo.gov here, here's my citation to the 274A. So here's my electronic version, which tells me what form I would need to fill out. On Westlaw, Code of Federal Regulations, I logged in, I went to the CFR, I searched CFR for employment and fiance, and this 274A12 citation comes up as well on Lexis or Westlaw. And like Michael said, it does require a certain work permit, and then the rub to the situation is it takes so much time for this work permit to go through, and you've spent money on it, that by the time she gets the work permit, she would have been eligible to work and when she got her green card. So it's kind of a money-making scam on the part of the federal government. But anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. So here's another scenario. The Trump administration, before he left office, President Trump, one of his agencies recently imposed a newer visa restriction, which was aimed at birth tourism, where a woman who travels to the United States to give birth so that their children would have birthright citizenship. They didn't want this to be available anymore. So they want to ban this birth tourism from happening. Can you find a Federal Register and a CFR citation for this new rule? So again, let's see if we can find this new rule. It's probably on regulations.gov. Or it might be on an agency website, the Department of State's website. Combating the prevalence of birth tourism. I guess it was typically the Chinese. The Chinese were coming in and having their babies in America so that they would be US citizens. Somebody has an answer here. 22 CFR Part 41. All right, that's pretty exact. How did you get that answer? What website did you go to?
I found it on regulations.gov.
All right, beautiful. Regulations.gov. Yep. This is an older screenshot of it. Here, they've redone regulations.gov, but if you did in quotes government, or if you didn't in quotes birth tourism, it would probably come up. So 2014 CFR Part 832. Yeah. So here we go. Classification as an alien. So before then, under current immigration policy, people could apply for a tourism visa to come to America to see the Grand Canyon, to go to Disneyland. But since the Trump administration at the end of 2020, they've changed the definition of what constitutes tourism for travel, where they inserted the primary purpose cannot be for a child to be given birth in the United States as a form of recreation. So that falls under the APA exemptions as a national security interest, so it didn't have to go through the rulemaking process. They basically changed this language, and it was a final rule within a week or two. So regulations.gov, relatively quick to find. Similarly, not so long ago, the US Department of Transportation proposed regulations that only trained dogs could be allowed inside an airplane cabin as an emotional support animal. Can we find this? Well, it's no longer a proposed rule, so can we find this rule? Where the definition of an emotional support animal for traveling on an airplane is now limited to just a dog. You can't have an emotional support parrot or an emotional support cockroach or whatever. It has to be an actual dog. And likely regulations.gov gives you that answer as well. Well, that was quick. Let's see. Let me see who was the first one who raised. Let's see here. Who we got? The Air Carrier Access at 14 CFR 382. I've got a couple of you with that same site. Let's see here. So again, regulations.gov. Regulations.gov is nice. They'll give you on their homepage comments that are due soon, newly posted proposed rules. So traveling by air with service animals, 14 CFR 382, that's correct. You'll see here regulations.gov. It'll tell you it's exempt from the notice and comment period. So yeah, so regulations.gov, probably on the State Department website as well, the travel for, if you're traveling any of the travel related regulations would be on the Department of State's website as well. So back to our fiance visa. She's now traveled from Moscow and she's in America. She's in Harrisburg. They've been living together and they got married. So they got married within 1 month of her entry in the USA. She'd like to file paperwork to adjust her status to a permanent resident. She'd like to get her green card now that she's gone to America under a K-1 and she's married her US citizen husband. What form does she need to file and with what agency to apply for a green card? Can we relatively quickly find that information? Because the K-1 visa, that's only a short-term visa to visit. And if you don't marry your husband or wife within a certain amount of time, you're required to go back to your home country. So you need to adjust your status and get a green card so that you can stay in America legally. So what form is it? Sorry, guys, I'm making you act like real lawyers here. Yes, Michael.
I found two. There's an immigrant petition and a green card application, and it's with the USCIS.
Right. So USCIS, that's the agency in charge of this, United States Citizenship and Immigration Service. So you have to file this. I mean, the technical form is the I-485 with, you'd file this form with the USCIS, Immigration Naturalization Service. It's the form to adjust status and become an actual immigrant petition for a green card. And you'd have to, I mean, it's hundreds of pages of information and instruction. And as long as you fill it out properly and follow all of the rules, it's not anything too hard. It's very rule specifically, and you have to dot all your I's and cross all your T's. So an agency website is your perfect place to go for such an answer. Kurzban's immigration source book, he would also have that sort of information quickly at your fingertips as well. So US agency, a secondary source in your practice area would give you those sorts of information as well. Lexis Westlaw. Okay, we're getting close to the end here, guys, I promise. A question, where would you find presidential executive orders? The much talked about executive orders. The Republicans complain about them. The Democrats complain about them. The executive orders, where are they? Where would we find them? If you're looking for the most recent executive order that a president signed, where would you think to go? Well, I got a bunch of answers there, so I'm sorry, my chat box is giving me. Federal Register, yes. Good answer. Because that's where the executive orders have to initially be published on the Federal Register, so federalregister.gov. So right there. So we go to federalregister.gov. There's a page for executive orders. I think they have them back to at least George W. Bush era. So Bush, Obama, Trump, and I think even Clinton is there as well. And now the current president as well. The CFR permanent website. So at the end of the year, They would be on the CFR website in the Title III. Under Title III of the Code of Federal Register, they'd be published in the final version. You can get at them usually on the White House website as well. This would be back when Trump was in office. If you go to the White House now, I noticed that the current president, he's archived all of the old stuff. So if you wanted to find the old executive orders on the White House website, you'd have to research a archives website as opposed to the current White House website. Agency websites might also have the executive orders that impact their area of responsibility. So this is the Immigration and Nationality Agency. Actually, I think this is Immigration Enforcement. So they would have the executive order posted about the steps that they're required to take to battle foreign terrorists. So a multitude of places you can find this information, federalregister.gov, regulations.gov, the CFR, the archives.gov is the official version of the CFR, but primarily start your regulatory research at regulations.gov if you're staying away from Lexis and Westlaw. Switching over to states, so Pennsylvania. What's the difference between the Pennsylvania Bulletin and the Pennsylvania Code? PA Code, PA Bulletin. I'm guessing it's sort of like the CFR versus the Federal Register, right? So the PA Bulletin is the weekly publication of Pennsylvania rulemaking activity. So instead of daily at the federal level, the state agencies publish their proposed rules on a weekly basis in the Pennsylvania Bulletin. And then the final version of the Pennsylvania rules go in the Pennsylvania Code. So I've got one. So basically, in the rulemaking process in Pennsylvania or different states, it's going to be similar, almost identical to the federal level. So disadvantages of Pennsylvania Code. Due to financing, there's no index. There's no index searching or anything. So you primarily are restricted to using it online, either at the PA Code website or on Lexis or Westlaw. So finding aids are no longer available. The index is no longer available. To save money, they don't publish those anymore. So you're pretty much down to just keyword and Boolean searching for the Pennsylvania regulations. Updating the regs in PA, obviously the Pennsylvania Bulletin. Most regulations will contain a statement to the effect that they will not be final until they appear on the Pennsylvania Bulletin website. So our final question of the morning is, can we find the regulation of oil and gas wells that protects the environment against oil and gas wells in Pennsylvania? So searching online at pacodeandbulletin.gov. Can we find the oil and gas well regulation that protects the environment? Just so you can see how the state regulation website looks and feels. It's a little bit more clunky, but it still functions. So oil and gas regulations that protect the environment. So on PAcodandbulletin.gov, I went in by title. So I go in by title and I select environmental protection because I don't want to search all 55 or however many titles. So I'm searching just environmental protection. And I search oil, gas well, environment. And I come up with a number of hits. But I find that 25 PA 78.91 is likely what I'm looking for. Yeah, 601.101. And then of course, in Pennsylvania, since they're not incorporated, this is just the bulletin, right? This is just the final rule. My final step would also be, I would have to run this citation. I would have to run it through the bulletin as well to see if my citation has been updated since it's not incorporated. So it's not the ECFR or anything. I would have to search both in the code site, of that website, and then as well as the bulletin to see if my particular citation has been updated. All right, so it'd be a two-step process. So pro tip 1, remember agency websites are often a great place to start. Your regulatory information, your regulatory search. Pro tip 2, if you're on Lexis or Westlaw, go into a practice area. Go into the environmental protection practice area and find the rules and regulations that are dealing with your area of law. So your practice area is on your databases. And then pro tip 3, if I'm not using Lexis and Westlaw, I'm going to start in regulations.gov. All right. And that's a pretty good 1 hour overview of regulations. All right. I hope you found it somewhat interesting, if not boring. In the real world, you're going to be dealing with regulations quite a bit. So it's handy and useful to at least understand the difference between a proposed rule and a final rule and all of that, and that the agencies have control over these things and where to look generally. So that's my last class with you. I hope to see some of you next year in advanced legal research, where we can dive into this twice as awesomely.
Brent, before everybody goes, I just want to take a minute to thank you for taking the time and doing all of these research classes for our students. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no
Will
sweat,
do.
no sweat. I enjoyed it. If there are any final questions, let them rip. Why can't I? Okay, thanks, guys.
And I have a question,
Yes,
but it's kind of off the beaten path.
okay.
Are those your workout boxing dummies behind you?
Oh, yeah?
Are you a
Yeah.
boxer or MMA guy?
No, I'm not a boxer. I do jujitsu.
Okay.
That's
I figured
actually
as
for my
much.
boy. That's a
that?
tackling dummy. That's for football. I'm a
Okay.
football coach too.
Sorry about the sidetrack.
No, I love talking about that stuff too. If you ever want to train, I can introduce you to a spot.
Well, I started boxing years ago, but I got into judo recently, but kind of cut back after COVID.
Sure. Yeah, we haven't been going as much since COVID. Are you from this area?
Initially, I was born in Philadelphia, family in South Jersey. So in essence, if you
Yes.
consider Pennsylvania this area, I guess so.
Well, if you're looking to get back into judo, I can give you a judo club as well.
Okay, thank you. I'll
good
shoot you
friend
an
of mine.
email.
I've got a good friend of mine who's very much into judo. So
Again, thank you for your time, sir.
you're welcome. Thank you.